Revelations by whistleblower website Wikileaks show that officials under former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton expressed great joy over the Communications decision to stop broadcasting Iranian channels. Revelations pertain to parts of Clinton's leaked emails, which were published in late February of 2016. In a letter sent to Clinton in June of 2012, senior State Department officials described the Eutelsat communications move as great news. European satellite provider pulled 19 Iranian television and radio channels off the air that year. Eutelsat said the move was in line with European sanctions and a French regulatory decision. IRIB condemned the ban, saying that it was imposed due to political pressure from the U.S. and Israel to block the truth about Islamic movements in the Middle East. And joining us out of Bristol for more on the story of Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist. Now, Mr. Gosling, why would the U.S., a so-called champion of civil liberties, after all this is the freedom of press, freedom of expression that we're talking about here, be overjoyed by an alternative Iranian, or a number of alternative Iranian channels being pulled off Eutelsat?
Well, look, if taking these channels down is good news, then my name is Joseph Goebbels from the Nazi regime, because this is an absolutely appalling comment by Hillary Clinton. What we need in our world's press, if we're to avoid World War III, is a good plural media, and it shows us exactly where Hillary Clinton's coming from. She is also condemning Wikileaks, of course, saying that they're part of some kind of Russian plot. Actually, the real truth of the matter is it's almost certain that it was the Democratic National Committee itself that leaked these emails to Julian Assange, who, by the way, is under house arrest here in London because he's running the most important investigative journalism operation on the planet. So we're not getting what we should do, which is proper balanced journalism anywhere really in the West anymore. And it looks like someone who's making a bid for the presidency wants to keep it that way. In fact, she would like to dictate what the people of the West, 800 or so million of us in Europe and another couple of 100 million in the States, are going to see and hear.
I mean, you would think that when the West purports to something or makes claims about a certain country or a certain movement, that some people, especially Western voters, would like to hear the other side of the story about what the Yemenis think, about what the Iranians think, when there's, when their issues are in Western papers and in Western media.
Well, one of the other scandals of this is Eutelsat, who pulled the Iranian channels that Hillary was so cock-a-hoop about. The deputy chair, vice chair of Eutelsat, is John Birt, Lord John Birt, who was the BBC Director General from 1992 until 2000, when I was working there. One of the things he was doing at the BBC was bringing in something called producer choice. What that meant was that everybody in the BBC that wanted to talk to someone in another department had to fill in a form and request, and all of the interactions within the BBC were all had to be accounted for under John Birt. So he was one of the people that really killed creativity within the corporation. And during the 1990s, we saw it go from an organisation that was producing some of the best documentaries, the best investigative journalism in the world, into effectively a kind of organ of the government, like George Orwell was warning us of. So John Birt is part of the problem, and the people who own these satellites often are. We need to have people who are a little bit braver and prepared to show all sides. And that, like I said before, is the only way we can avoid conflict, where we're looking at, for example, in Syria now, the potential of a third world war. We need to have all sides on our channels. Otherwise, we're simply living in a propaganda age. And with this high technology, I think that that is actually one of the most brilliant possibilities to avoid peace. Hillary Clinton and John Birt, people like that, clearly don't want it. They would just want to control what we hear and what we see and the way we think.
Indeed, and why would there still be these anti-Iran channels that are operating out of the U.S. and out of Europe, especially the MKO, which is a terrorist organization that's carried out hundreds, if not thousands, of terrorist operations on Iranian soil against Iranian citizens? This is clearly a terrorist organization, yet they have a channel that's operating freely. Why aren't they being shut down?
Good question. It's because psychological warfare has become a key component of the West's war on terror. And as people leave the mainstream media, many young people here in Britain simply do not ever watch television because they just don't trust or believe it. They realise it's biased, it's propagandistic, it's very one-sided. They get their news often from their friends and from social media. And what we've seen recently, just over the last few weeks, is Facebook, for example, visiting Israel, closing down lots of pro-Palestinian accounts on Facebook and doing deals with the Israelis. So psychological warfare is what this is about. Back in the old days, we used to have really good journalism here in Britain, big newspapers like The Independent, The Guardian. The Independent, by the way, had a massive amount of advertising pulled from it, a national newspaper, and then had to basically sell its profitable arm because people weren't advertising. What happens is the advertisers actually get together and target newspapers that are telling the truth, withdrawing their advertising. So you get the advertisers dictating the editorial policy. At The Guardian, for example, the former MP Michael Meacher, he wrote an article in 2003 with the headline, "The war on terrorism is bogus." I have a friend, Andy, that worked at The Guardian at the time, and he told me that millions of pounds of advertising was pulled literally the same day that article came out. So you can see the advertisers are starting to dictate the policy in the mainstream press here, and the BBC are suffering from groupthink. In other words, they're going along with what the government says.